Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Yes, we're quite thin on the ground this morning, but I assume that HBF unwell, I think he said on Tuesday. So. Anyway, good morning. Yes, it is 9:30, so this planning examination hearing session is open. I'm William Fieldhouse, the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to the plan. A reminder, please, for the switch mobile phones and laptops, etc., to silent mode. No fire alarm tests planned for today, I don't think. So if the alarm does go off, we will need to evacuate the building, come through the doors into the lobby area around to the left and left into reception out through the main door. Congregated this is the far end of the building behind me. Program officer isn't around today, so apologies for that. But I think we'll be able to manage without them. Thanks to Rory for stepping in and helping. So today we're dealing with two matters: economic development this morning, and then town centres. We wouldn't start town centres until 2 o'clock for the benefit of the people. So we'll stick to that. I don't think we'll take all the way to deal with the economic issues based on who's here and what they've got to. I'm expecting them to say and the questions I've got, but we'll, we've got the time that we need. There are a couple of documents I'll mention. First of all, I think we agreed yesterday that the statement of common ground relating to Beckton and Riverside in response to point 10 will be available next Wednesday. Yeah, that's for discussion in week 4. Aberdeen investments are spending something. Yeah. I know they're party to that statement of common ground, but they seem keen to talk about things related to this afternoon, and they did submit a letter accepting today. About exactly how that relates to the HS policy, which it's not totally clear. Anyway, that was published yesterday. You can see that, and if anyone else wants to see it, it's EWS number 68, I think, in the examination library. And then one other document that again is not this afternoon that I saw this morning is a detailed wording changes for premise of Queen's Market. So I've got that as I think that will be the council. No, not yet.
Yeah. That's still to copy.
Right, okay. Yeah.
You've got your printed copies.
You've got it. I've got it. I've seen it. So if those who needs to see it, it's not until this afternoon. Okay, the purpose of the examination is to read it on the 8th of June. It's leaving prior to the sound, and if not, I would have council, and then there's a bit else, which is to speak to quick nameplate morning. And you're probably aware, anyway, I published action points following the week's 1 and 2 hearing sessions. Council's responses to those were published 30th December and 9th of January, respectively. Documents 17, ED 19, and the responses to those action points have been added to agenda items this week and week 4. So we'll be picking up those, and there's a couple of them relevant to today, both this morning and this afternoon. The latest schedule of the council's main modifications published on the 9th of January, ED 20. It's not particularly a version, but a version that indicates which of the modifications that has been made. Which is sort of an improvement to the plan, but it's necessary for soundness. It goes beyond being a minor modification. So that schedule is ED 21A. That was published on Monday. It doesn't have any substantive difference in terms of the content of the words. Published on January 20. So if you're looking at the modifications the council's proposed to the plan, We'll talk about each of those proposed modifications, irrespective of whether councils presented them as main or minor, or other, as we go through some of them this morning, this afternoon. Okay, so that's the basic housekeeping and procedural stuff that I'll cover. So I will now go around the table, if I could please, and let people introduce themselves. Thank you.
Sarah Joe, Senior Planner at Newham.
Richard Blessell, Partner Planning at Ratley's on behalf of Newham.
Interim Planning Policy Manager at Newham.
Hi, Justin Kenworthy at Stantec, representing the actually we're on matter 9, which is this afternoon.
Yes.
Obviously picked up on the agenda, right? The agenda now says starting at 2 p.m. I obviously wasn't yesterday, so I didn't pick up on that. So I'm here anyway. So I'll come back at 2 o'clock session, but I'm focused on matter 9, HS8, which is the hotel policy, and therefore how it affects N8.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, apologies if it wasn't clear. I thought it did say on the agenda when it was published last week, but if it wasn't,
I didn't. I clearly haven't seen. I went online yesterday to look at the agenda, but I couldn't see in brackets.
Right.
It said 2 p.m.
Apologies.
Don't worry. And I was hoping to get through the session quickly. So, however, before this afternoon, but
yeah, no, I'll have to speak to that now.
Yeah.
Well, actually, to be honest, with that policy this morning on hotels, I don't think anyone else, well, we always deal with it anyway, if they are interested in it. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
So remind me when we've gone through the J policies, that we'll do with it. Is that okay with the council? Yeah, okay.
That's
great. I think the only other person that's well, I also want to be they're interested in other policies. As I say, if necessary, then they can talk about the hotel policy. Right, okay, thank you. So don't let me forget that. Okay, sorry, moving on.
Chris Gaskell, TP9 Limited, I'm a still
Ramona Kiandu, Planning Manager at LV. Action.
Yeah. As you hear, which is first on the agenda, but I'm happy to pick up action point 17, which relates to just some detailed wording relating to allegations.
Yes.
I'm going to deal with that before we go through each of the employment policies.
Yeah.
Right, is that okay?
Yes, because you've mentioned speaking about HS8, so Antonia Morgan of.
Yes, okay, thank you. But we'll come on to that later.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I know we've talked about it, we've already talked about it once, but we'll come back and talk about it again after we've been through the J policies. Right. Any other queries? Not today. Right. Let's pick up then the first one, which is just the response to action point 4, which was simply to incorporate the revised calculations of the employment floor space and office floor space that we had discussed under matter 1. K1, comparing our period over which they relate to, which goes back to the space date of 2021, but rolled forward to 2042. So we've discussed the rationale for those figures, how they roll forward. It's a different approach for the industrial, to be talked about that understood. So we don't need to go back over that. And the modification, as I said, we had an initial discussion about the period to which they related, but we've been updated to move on from to take account of the change since 2021. So can I just go back to that? So I understand the base dates and how it was calculated. I suppose the question is, I think you said that you also sensed check to see if there was any significant changes that may make that need to be updated.
Yes, I think what we discussed last time was that the base date plan and the base date for all the numbers was still at 2021.
Yeah.
But when we updated the balance, when we updated the outstanding requirements, which is also in the matter statement,
Yeah.
here it took into account the latest planning application and planning permission data. So it takes into account what planning permissions had actually been granted between 2021 and the latest GLA data of 2023. So the numbers that you have in the council matter statement is the residual requirement
From 2023.
from yes, now from 2023.
So does that mean that the figure of wall space figures of 6,400? No, sorry, not 6,400. 418,000 square metres of industrial is needed from 2023.
Yes.
Because you've netted off
We've netted everything off.
Yeah.
So, of course, not everything in the early years of the plan was delivered exactly per annum.
No.
And especially because they were funny COVID years, 21, 22 and into 2023.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the need number is calculated per annum over the whole plan period. But yeah, what you saw now is the residual.
So should this actually then, this modification to J1, say, where's those figures between 2023 and 2024, 2042?
It could be because it's the balance as of 2023 that's required.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that was what you had said when we discussed before, and then I was slightly surprised to see 2021. I mean, the council.
Yeah, I think if we are changing to 2020, we have to change the job change number because we are now calculating like 21.
Yeah. So the requirement is calculated over the period 21 to 42.
Yes.
So, because that's the base date in the plan. But so if you're looking how to meet that today, the residual need is calculated from 23 onwards.
And that's what those floor space is.
So both are factually correct because you could express it as 21. The need is 21 and this is the residual as of 23.
Yeah.
Or you could say that this is the need remaining as of 2023. I think it's just the plan base date was always 21.
Yeah.
Keeping saying base date 21 because that's when all the numbers relate to. On one hand, that's cleaner than introducing a new residual.
But if the figure is a residual, would these figures be different if you just ignore what happened in terms of floor space changes between 21 and 23?
You would restart the whole plan in 2023, and if there was a small backlog that had developed between 21 and 23, that would essentially be written off. So, for example, the office requirement at the moment is a requirement 21 through to 42. If you should, and we haven't delivered much because obviously it was a COVID year. So if you cut the first few years off the plan, the whole plan period requirement would drop very slightly. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So because
that's what these figures had done.
Yes, they have done.
Yeah. So sorry, if you went back to 2021, these figures would be slightly higher.
No, sorry, the need requirement is always based in 21.
So where's these residual?
The residual is what's shown in the council's latest paper 21 to 42. But I don't know if I'm making this.
Well, are those figures different from these 118 and 418,000?
So the residual in the latest paper we've got, the gross demand for industrial over 21 to 42 is 417. That's because the plan period's been extended slightly when
2042.
The 2042. So the plan period's been extended slightly, but we're working on 20 or 21 years of need. So if the need is per annum, there's 21 years on it to meet. If you restarted your need calculation in 2023, you would write off 21, 22 So the requirement would drop because you're working to an 18-year plan period as opposed to a 20-year plan period.
Okay. I'm not totally clear, but I don't really have a strong view. I just think it needs to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
So I can I leave it with you
Yeah.
to either confirm that it's 21 or 22 of these things raised.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the job, I don't really see what purpose do they serve. I mean, planning deals hectares of floor plate. You get that. Changes in jobs that take place in you or anywhere else will obviously be affected by those floor space changes, but they're affected by other things as well. I know to some extent, well, the office projections are based on job change,
Yes.
whereas the industrial are not, are they? They're based on.
They're based upon, I think they are.
Oh, are they? No,
Yes.
That's job change.
Yeah. And then they're given,
Translated.
they're translated into floor space.
So to that extent, those jobs, they're directly related to the floor plate.
Yeah.
What would you monitor in planning? Both, or do you monitor the floor space changes?
Yeah, so monitoring, we monitor change in each cluster that's within
Yeah.
for completions and approvals.
In floor space?
Yes, in floor space.
Not in jobs.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, sorry, because I just want to say because floor space is like definitely easier to monitor because jobs get changed with the floor space.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're sticking to the floor space for monitoring.
I mean, the plan that's submitted had jobs in it. It always puts me what the purpose in the planning document to put these job targets in when you're dealing in hectares and floor space.
I think I just say there's a difference of opinion with some of your colleagues.
Yeah,
I've got the IP on the go at the moment where
Yeah.
they've asked. My line has been exactly as Sarah reported that we monitor floor space, GLA monitors floor space, the AMR's floor space, and it's floor space that's in control of the planning authority.
Yeah, quite.
But some inspectors and some readers of plans just like reference the job number as an overarching almost introduction. But you're right, for the purposes of the mechanics of applying the plan, it's the floor space that we control.
But actually, it's in my mind, it creates a bit of confusion because you could be achieving the job change in a different way, couldn't you? And then it's feel, what is the plan doing, what it's meant to be doing, what is it not? But anyway, my role is not to decide necessarily which is preferable. The plan as submitted had jobs in it. I don't think I could say it's only sound to do that. So on that basis, I'll leave it with the jobs in. But okay, right. Thank you for that. So anything else on the need, policy wording, etc. I'll just leave it with you as a final check as to whether you should say 23 or 21, whichever was most accurate. I don't really understand. I know it'll be a different time period to what the plan deals with in housing, but I don't see that as a problem. But I don't think there's any in terms of that undermining effectiveness of the plan. Okay, thank you for that. Which then brings us on to, I said I would deal with AP 17 response to that. So let me just get that up and remind me what that was about, which this is in response to action.
Yes.
Which came up on a couple of allocations, which you see, but it wasn't just you. I think there was another site provider that was
there are 4 sites.
4 sites. The action, but especially remember. So, discussion of putting in sites, but identified. Yes, it's about providing the same quantity of business and industrial floor space as the permitted scheme. So I think, and then there was another phrase in the same policy.
Yeah.
So did you just go through, you explain what the proposed model does and why, and then we'll get an input from
Yeah.
PC. Thanks.
So we can propose modification FMO 34, 41, 42, and 44 to the development principles of the site allocation, which are the sites having dwellings that they have to provide same quantity of space. Modification is that we take into account the future change in the market and the future permissions and site. So we change the policy wording into the quantity of the permitted and floor space as a minimal, and then in like future assessment in the application, take into account that permitted floor space as minimum, and negotiate for the floor space. And any reduction in rent quantity have to follow the approach consistent with the local plan policy J, because of the site we have applied this principle is being clear. We have a long implementation history, and they have no existing business on the site, but there are existing cleared. So we think that is the benchmark of the employment potential of the sites that can be delivered. That's why we put the modification stats.
So what you put for this, if I'm looking at N8, SA9, the first one, which is what it is.
Yes.
I mean, you put that sentence in, but there's a sentence before it, which is one of the things I thought it was about. Was it in the paragraph sentence?
It's the first sentence in the development principle. And
No, it's the fourth paragraph.
yeah, it's that.
Yeah, but there's a sentence at the beginning of the fourth paragraph. There's two sentences. So the first sentence says employment should be consistent with notified policy J1. So it already says that.
And we make it specific to J3 because J3 is about protecting the space, like
Okay.
how
So don't try to get this out.
J1 is about the priority users of the site, and J1 say that we allow employment site if there's support in the site allocation principle. So that is originally there because it's like after site allocation users who J1.
Okay. And that's more about the uses rather than
Yeah.
use. Okay. Understood. So that deals with that, and then there's another sentence, and then we come on to the one about the quantity,
Yeah.
and that goes back to the permitted scheme. And you clarified the business and industrial.
Yeah.
Employment, that's all industrial uses. There's research and things like, and
Yes.
sorry, I'll come back to that. Okay. Right, okay. So, I'll hand over to LDC.
Yeah. I think the thing that we are a bit concerned about is that it's saying that it should be provided as a minimum, the same quantity as the permitted scheme, but PML itself has an outline mission, and in that we don't have a minimum space, we only have a max, which is around 51,000 square meters flexible space. So I suppose what we're asking for is to just maybe simplify the wording so that there isn't a confusion that that's something we should be providing as a minimum, given that the outline permission and the purpose of it is to provide that flexibility where there is a bit of push and pull between residential and employment, given that PML is part of an affordable housing portfolio. So as you know, there's a struggle in itself in delivering affordable housing, which means that there are, floor spaces that need to be moved around. So that's mainly the point, essentially.
Okay. Say again why it refers back to a particular committee scheme. I mean, we've talked about the relationship with allocations and planning permissions in other aspects of policy, whether it's tall buildings or whatever. It seems to be allocations are being tied to planning permissions.
Yeah.
Why does this refer specifically to a permission? A particular permission happens to exist at a particular time.
Yeah, because we think that for all this proposed sites, it's quite tricky because they have a long, construction history. They have loads of question and they are being created. So it is difficult for DMO officers to use existing businesses as a site to protect that capacity. So we think that constant that they have to do it with the DM process is act as the greatest potential site can be used for employment. So yeah.
Okay, so they may have had industrial use in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Sorry. And they've been cleared.
Yes.
So you haven't got any other reference point. It's not like the business, the buildings are still there or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, is also the more local plan. It's because previously in the LDC plan is like an industrial location. So it has its industrial significance on that. So we think that's the capacity.
And the modification by adding this policy on, by adding this sentence on referring to J3, it provides the flexibility to go through a process to reduce the quantity, to go through the J3 policy approach.
Yes.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to understand how the J3 approach would apply to PML, given that it doesn't necessarily have existing employment uses. So that would be, we would appreciate if that was clear, but I think on top of that, maybe if we could agree to simplify it so that we are expected to deliver it in compliance with the permitted scheme, because I think the fact that it's a maximum floor space, meaning that we do have flexibility to deliver under that, but we just don't want that to be confused with officers where they're thinking we should be within the 50,000 square metre range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's this site unique in terms of this permission as a maximum. I don't know what the reason why you've had a maximum
Outline permission.
Yeah. Are the other three different in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's like we are happy to take it away and consider more clarification of that. Also, this particular site. So I think we always have any future that they have come up with the employment cross space. They want to follow that in future.
Okay, well, can we, if that one is different to the other three in that respect, can we make that?
Yeah.
And then, subject to that, I'm going to talk about J3 shortly, so maybe we'll just think about how that would work in the being applied to a site that doesn't have existing permission as well. So if you want to leave after this discussion, but you might want to say J3 anyway.
Yeah. Because I think, it would just be useful to understand how that applies where there aren't existing employment uses in place. What are we actually expected to do in that regard? But it was mainly actually point 17. So,
okay. Well, I'll leave the meeting aside.
Yeah.
So on the others, the other three allocations, it's the same. It's exactly the same approach. It's referring to the minimum payout versus J.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other points, comments on? No. Let me just take a step back then before we move on to the individual policies and go through them. Just to be clear about the terminology in the plan, employment use and industrial use. I mean, and you've modified it, but these did have a different wording, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I think the plan is clear that industrial uses are light industrial, general industrial B2, so storage distribution, but also some other sui generis use for micro fulfillment, dark kitchen shops, some other sort of transport delivery type uses, yeah. And then some other sui generis uses, which are quite broad, including waste management, utilities, sites, data, transport data, so transport type uses as well.
Yeah,
That's the range of types beyond these industrial.
Yeah. Broadly in line with, I think it's London Plan Philosophy 4, I think, sets out what the London Plan considers to be industrial uses. So the normal bit that trips a bit up very slightly is the associated sui generis, which you just have to form a bit of a judgment.
Yeah.
Sui generis is the decision maker has to work out whether it's an industrial type.
But that's sort of a matter of fact and degree, and it's like you see it, you recognise it if you see it.
Exactly, but otherwise it follows London Plan, which lays that long list. That's what you see.
So that's industrial, but then employment uses in this plan also are offices, the E-class offices, and research and development, E2. So that's it. When it talks about employment,
And actually for industrial, it also includes PG2, like research and development, but like it's more like industrial research and development.
that wasn't included in the list of industrial uses.
I think it's in the
EG2 light industrial is an industrial. When we calculate the requirement, we tend to keep light industrial goes into the industrial numbers. Office sectors go into office. R&D can span the two. You can have an industrial lab type R&D space, the same as a standard office. So it's always a bit fuzzy. I was just trying to get there.
Well, in the definition, what I noted down, you put R&D to employment, not in industrial.
Yeah, I'm just checking what we've got.
So I'm looking at in the glossary, you've got employment and you've got industrial. Industrial doesn't include the EG2 R&D.
So in the glossary we have the definition of employment.
Yeah.
And it includes both industrial and office. And R&D spend.
Well, it's in there, but then you look at the definition of industrial, it's just everything that's employment other than offices and research and development. If you look at the next page, industrial.
So London Plan E4 and for industrial logistics services to support London's economy has part of R&D as an industrial. It has research and development relating to the old Class B1B in the London Plan is classed as industrial. So if your R&D is occupying an old B1B, London Plan treats it as an industrial use. If your R&D was a standard B1, more of akin to a B1A, it would have been treated as an office. It's one of the issues with the use class order and the fact that the R&D span.
Yeah, sorry, I got really now. I think we are having to.
I don't think it was a strong view. It's just I think it needs at the moment it is completely. It puts R&D into employment. But if you want to put R&D into the industrial, it's fine. That means the only thing that isn't industrial, the offices would.
And of what we call with a planning hat on employment uses, not remembering that most of the jobs in the economy are outside of traditional B classes, education, health.
Absolutely. They wouldn't be retail, education, health, leisure, food, etc., that employ people wouldn't be employment users.
Exactly. They wouldn't be in the scope of the policies, they're being scoped for something else.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just because people issue. No, probably.
And what R&D type activity we've got, and what R&D type activity we've got tends to be more of an office than a big lab, Cambridge kind of scenario where they require labs and wet labs. That's quite where Newham is.
But it's important to have these definitions because when you're talking about employment uses and land being, safeguarding for employment uses, I mean, I think it goes quick like that. The GLA was one of their concerns, wasn't it, about protecting industrial, not encroaching in with E-class uses and I think some of the ones you proposed talking like that. But clearly, it didn't include retail, leisure, food and drink type. It's employment in which some plans seem to work. Yeah. Right. So, in terms of policy J1, I don't really have all that many questions. I mean, that's an issue in terms of the part of the SIL that we'll come on to specifically. So basically, what J1 does, it goes back to these definitions again. It establishes a hierarchy of employment designations and non-designated sites. Its uses to them. So actually, SIL and LIL, all the industrial uses, plus R&D. This policy has, which is okay. That's one way of dealing with it, isn't it? So you've got industrial defined as that. You're saying on these sites, R&D will be allowed. Okay. That's what it says. And that's all the employment uses and offices. So you're not putting off. So and that's consistent with us, GLA, etc. Okay, and then the one retail parks is interesting. So this is to allow the conversion of retail parks to industrial. Anyway, so that would access to the road network, allow industrial uses to be established plus R&D.
Yeah.
Is that a trend? Or
we can see that there are interest from the developer area to transform in the retail park into industrial. But yeah, we do see that interest because banks have more retail supply than we need. So
we'll talk about that in another time.
Yeah.
We are, to answer clear, we are seeing it because a lot of those retail parks were developed at a very low inefficient density with acres of car parking. They responded to retailers who are no longer in the market. So it's a new trend that a lot of these retail site owners are looking to redevelop their sites. And when they come forward for redevelopment, because of the nature and the layout of most of those sites and the locations are used to dealing with HGVs, etc., trying to direct them to consider a new industrial use as opposed to just a default to housing always seems quite sensible. And you've even got firms who are reletting surplus retail space for V8 warehousing. I've got other boroughs where that's happening. So given that we have a finite amount of land in London, and industrial, unless it's a protected, designated industrial site, traditionally industrial hasn't been considered as part of looking forward as defaulted to housing. It just seems a fairly sensible criteria to have. And considered. And also, even if you're redeveloping your supermarket, which is happening increasingly often, aside from retail, big retail parks, the retailers are looking at their old format 1990s single floor supermarket and thinking what to do on top of it, redevelop it. Just keeping that in the mix.
And that's consistent on the plan, isn't it, first?
Yes, and I think if the London plan was written today, because it would probably take a slightly different approach to its retail policies, reflecting a post-COVID retail market. The approach to encourage people to look at retail parks as they come up seems perfectly in line with London Plan, and the GLA elsewhere have always supported that kind of approach.
Okay, thank you. And because of the broad definition of industry, it's, so it could be transport related uses on these sites or whatever, rather than sort of industry. Yeah.
Exactly. And transport isn't something that we have huge demand for, but every time it crops up, we really struggle to find a site. What often gets picked at is an industrial site, and it goes to transport. So, yeah, the nature of these sites lends themselves to that kind of consideration.
Right, so then we come on to these local mixed-use areas, which are defined on the policy plan. So that is all employment uses, the industry, the general and semi-generous industrial ones. So it's the lighter industrial type uses, yeah. Okay. And then the micro business use areas, the same as the local mixed use, but not the 8. Is that right? That's because they're smaller and locationally deep.
So those are like actual stepping sites.
Yeah.
We see as a like supply for the workspaces for the private. So it's not going to be use because like the site is quite small and it's close to the central location, and we think this is suitable like with business and startup in the Newham and have a high quality startup rate.
Okay, so it's quite a detailed, specific approach, but I can see the logic of it relating to different types of areas. So. And then finally, offices employment uses, they're town centre uses. That's what they're subject to. Okay, thank you. Right. Then policy J2, part 3, supports new employment floor space outside all of the above locations if certain criteria are met. Is that right?
Yeah.
So again, it's
Probably
J2 part 3. It's a big plan this time. Not parts of it. I'm making that. Yeah. You don't even know them all. Am I going to? Anyone else?
I think you're right. Yeah. Part 3 just responds, I think, to the London-wide and the borough difficulty in securing industrial floor space. That if somebody wishes to promote us something on a site we have no idea about, then because of the strategic shortages in supply, policy will welcome it. It wouldn't look to get in the way of windfall industrial if that's what we get.
But obviously, I mean, it says it's supported as one of the following criteria, but obviously there'd be other, normal planning considerations.
Yes.
We just pay like traffic and changing appearance and living conditions and all that sort of things.
Yeah.
But it's permitted. It's sort of, for that very reason. It's because we need suitable things. Thank you. Right, okay, so I don't have any other questions about those, but we'll come back then to, and I don't think anyone really picked up on the lines on the map being objected to, other than main objection, I think, still in this still in the SA4 allocation. We talked about it when we talked about that allocation of the Matter 4. I understood the issue that the permission allowed that bit of that triangular sill that extends into the allocation to be redeveloped and reconfigured, I think. So floor space would be retained, but it would be somewhere else, right?
So yes, the triangular bit, as you say, the kind of goes into the site allocation. It's part of the hybrid planning permission. That's basically the location of part of the detailed component, which has planning permission for 400 homes and kind of flexible employment space at the ground floor. That's not entirely industrial floor space, it's kind of flexible employment floor space. And so I suppose our representations were, particularly given the policy functions of SIL, which expressly says in the table that no residential floor space is permitted in this designation, it felt to us that triangular bit was kind of inappropriate to remain still, given its in effect a kind of agreement with co-location with 400 homes and to the place. So I'll suggest, I think it's quite a simple one, that the sill boundary should just go down to the edge of the site location, so that the remainder of that sill remains, but depends on the site location.
And it would still be subject to the allocation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I'm not sure if we've only recently looked at that, but I mean, I take the point around the intent of that new wording, which is that the government should deliver as the employees scheme. So I thought it is the and go through the J3 process in the event of change there. I think the point that was raised earlier around kind of the nuances of the wording kind of as a minimum. Again, the planning push is hybrid of majority being outline as well. So in our case, we have kind of maximum floor spaces. It's an outline, so there's degrees of wriggle room in that will come forward to matter stage. So I suppose we'd be interested in working with council in what kind of final that would be. But I think you're right. The way that drafting kind of works is it kind of seeks to protect the principles established under that planning permission for industrial uses. I think I'll keep this around the actual policies, probably more than anything else.
Yeah.
That we feel for this particular site should be strategic anymore, given planning permission basis.
your position is, well, a planning permission is somewhere off from being implemented.
It has been implemented.
It has been.
It hasn't been built yet, but it has been.
Yeah. I think that's the difficulty, that these things have a very long gestation process, and it's very common to come back to the table and renegotiate your application. And there's a concern that the strongest protection the council has is a still designation at the moment, and material to the current application is the mix offered. So if that's to be renegotiated later down the line, then the starting position still needs to be the same, that it was an industrial site, it had a strong industrial protection on it, and that should be part of the mix. So yeah, they're free to deliver scheme at the moment. This is all what happens if it comes back to the table, and what weight does the decision maker give to the fact it was permitted as a loss of strategic industrial land, because the mix that was being, the specific mix that was being offered as part of the application, and the decision maker might have not had the same, may not have reached the same conclusion.
So relying on the policy wording in N2SA4, number of elements of that. One is personally dwelling unit. It also has the clause about as a minimum to deliver the permitted amount of floor space in the permitted scheme. That's not in this case, because that itself was negotiated down from the amount of industrial floor space that could have been on that bit of SIL.
Yeah, it's a formal SIL release.
Yeah.
So there's quite
We've already gone down.
there's quite a high bar to remove SIL. So it's just making sure there's a clear starting point if there's a renegotiation of that scheme, and full weight should be given to the loss of what is currently designated industrial.
You have two starting point positions if you were to renegotiate. You have the SIL part, but you also have this as a minimum to permitted scheme.
Yeah, I think it's 2 points, because what the permission is proposed is a standard like employment stack building like outside the steel, which is quite far away from the steel. So we think that like steel should be clustered together, obviously. So that triangular bit, like that location is, we have to retain that bit of steel to carry out the steel function. So that steel boundary, we want to retain that is because of the location of it. And that clause in the site allocation for the quantum is about the quantum they have to use as a benchmark for future negotiation.
Okay, Brian, anything further you want to say?
I suppose it's the reality of there being a planning permission of 400 homes on that part of the site, which it feels to me that it kind of it's really industrial, which is and when the previous decision was taken because of GLA decision, it was that decision was taken in the knowledge that at the time it was a departure from the plan, but the overall benefits of the development kind of outweigh that. We're obviously now at a stage where that planning has been implemented, so it feels that the decision taken will go through with an acknowledgement that it's kind of likely contrary to the objectives of for that part of the site because of the overall scheme benefits. And so I suppose we just feel that if the plan isn't adopted as is, we're going to be in a position where there's a bit still that's just going to come forward with housing.
Yeah.
The totality, I mean, that feels like it's kind of sort of come to the objectives.
I suppose the logic to follow that through would be, well, when the plan's reviewed, if that's happened, just the designation would change. Whatever it becomes.
I suppose if we go back to what about the interaction between various policies, and obviously we've got 5,000 homes here, which is great news for council and housing delivery to the overall supply. A bit like the conversation we're having with building plans as well, that it makes sense for the plan to reflect the approved strategic objectives of the plan overall. So rather than kind of protecting these industrial stuff, we're saying we're kind of welcoming that there's 400 homes going to be built on it, which in itself contributes to the objectives of the plan. You take the point we're making now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Okay, right. Is there anything else on the one? Okay, well, I'll move on then to intensification. So policy J2 part 1. Intensify site the net increase in street floor space. To be the most appropriate intensification format. Okay. Right, so I'm going to be picking up on what the main mods these. Can I just go back to policy J1 and the implementation text and the mods that have been proposed as minor? Just clarifying, isn't it?
Yeah, so MO 51.1 is the cross-reference on the site with potential for intensification using the end-on there review to cross-reference just those sites identified as potential for intensification, to make clear. And 51.2 is clarification on council's position to proactively promote intensification.
Yeah.
And then 52.1 is the clarification on employment land. Yes.
And 53.1
is this is a clarification to make clear in the that we will use conditions to secure different kind of resources.
Rent changes to class take away.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the LA issue.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I don't think the material changed very much. So it's be more to make those as my own modifications. I think. I mean, it's not my goal, but what I would say is I don't think any of those are necessary for soundness. I think they do clarify soundness. I mean, GLA but I think it's using planning conditions to prevent changes in need classes. You describe it, it's the normal practice, isn't it? So,
the GLA has asked every local plan to follow the same approach across London and control E-classes.
Yeah. That's the question then, is whether that's been introduced as a modification, is it treated as a main modification or not, but depending on how the plans originally were, isn't it? Because I think the way this plan is constructed, it's clear that those are the uses and not other class uses, and therefore it kind of follows on, well, therefore the council will be that was right. Right, okay, thank you for that. So in terms of yeah, I mean, this is about the plan, isn't it? Using appropriate formats to try and justify. And it applies to it's about industrial uses, which are potentially also apply to them. Use that be allowed on mills, which I think you've said is easy. So, okay, I don't have any questions about that. So then we come on to co-location. So there's a modification proposed here. I think I'm making this is a big plan, so it's easy to basically what this is saying is co-location with residential for specific reasons is ruled out in certain areas, basically on certain locations. What the modification seeks to clarify is the essence of that, I think, isn't it? But it's talking about particular sites listed in table 69.
Yeah, because we want to make clear that we in the employment plan we deal with employment sites. So any sites that are outside the employment destination we identified in policy J1, they have to follow other policy, for example, the agency policy if they want to apply co-location with other uses. But the intention of this policy is to basically restrict co-location on steel and mills and allow co-location on one end of the north, and not to restrict co-location within this two areas. Yeah, it's just for mill and steel.
And specific mixed-use areas where.
Yeah, there are two more sites that is restricted.
So it's not a general restriction.
Yeah.
It flows from the London plan, which requires the development plan to consider suitable locations for co-location, which it has done, which is why it's picked the moors as suitable locations for co-location. And it guards against what we see quite often, which is developers approach the council with co-location solution on designated industrial sites, which essentially means that the intensification capacity on those sites is absorbed by residential as opposed to net additional industrial. So it's trying to guard and protect the intensification capacity on our designated sites to come forward for intensified industrial as opposed to, for example, putting houses on top of all our industrial units, losing that capacity.
I mean, is it totally clear that co-location isn't allowed on sill?
Well, you can't have co-location on sill because residential is absolute.
And does the policy actually make that clear? Which, because it says, if you're looking at J2 part 2, it says co-location specifically LNUAs and micro-business areas identified in each specific allocation.
I think so. Policy J2 should be together with J1 because in J1.
J1 prevent such co-location.
Yeah, because in table 6 and 7 it's out the fields and the mills, and in the design and delivery applications clear that over statute.
Yeah.
So I think they need to get one.
Yeah, I guess it is.
I think, yeah, what you're getting is the SIL policy doesn't have any big shiny lights.
No. And then
it does when you go through the J1s. Does it? You read it on the standing.
Yeah. I think when I read this about co-location, J2, to grouping out in some places, you didn't prefer.
Yes. I think it's the council just trying to be pragmatic with the London plan saying that you can, in some urban areas, adopt a co-location approach, so that one's just being clear that we think a co-location approach is acceptable in these specific areas, but not elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we've gone through the London plan process for a developer in a local employment area to come to us and promote a co-location approach that was being pulled out, and the plan was drafted.
Okay, thank you. I've got my head around it now. Okay, so the use is allowed. And you referred in your statement to very high, relatively high business formation rates in small businesses, micro businesses. So this is a type of activity that you'd seek it to positively. Right. Went on to the economic strategies. So this is J1, back to J1 pathway. Sorry, I'm looking down. I've done it thematically rather than going through and do it. The main thing about economic strategies is these are picked up in all major developments, employment floor space. Economic strategy details how the proposed floor space responds to the latest demand evidence, council's economic objectives, market testing, phasing strategy. So, right, you would say this is to prevent, reduce vacancy risk and prevent forms of industrial development being widened. I suppose the question is, well, why would the market do something they don't think they're going to be able to back themselves?
To be fair, it has happened.
Yeah.
And specifically, the issue that we often come across is that when you get a mixed use scheme and a mixed use development, the pressure on the promoter side is to maximise the number of jobs and minimise the amount of floor space. So we've got a track record of having far too much light office space promoted to us, which later down the line doesn't, or office format, very light industrial office, which then doesn't let, because that's not what the market was in demand for. It wanted a different format of floor space. So it's just trying to make it a bit of a nuance that if you're coming to us with a mix, it isn't a case of just saying here's 1,000 square metres with a goods lift or a door.
Yeah.
It's trying to make sure that it is actually fit for purpose and it's fit for the current market, because it has been quite common across London to have a lot of ground floor employment space offered, with a calculation that says the factory used to have 20 jobs, here's a little workspace that does 20 jobs. And you're like, well, that's not what the market wants here. Trying to tease that through.
So it's kind of going back to these allocations. A lot of them are mixed use with employment. So the developer knows they're going to have to provide employment, so it's to make sure that they don't just kind of not totally sticky. They just provide something that fits the policy, but it doesn't actually tailor to. Yeah,
and there's been more thought to it than we could ever do at a local plan examination or draft the application for. It's trying to inform that, and given that the London plan is quite strong on especially protecting SMEs, creatives, and all these little sectors, is to make sure that if you're considering space, if you're telling us that it's going to be for creative or it's going to do light industrial, it actually does. And the other thing is to make sure it's viable and suitable for the end occupier. So, for example, one thing we come across a lot of the time is that developers try to deliver multi-deck or multi-floor industrial schemes with goods lifts, but then forget the fact that that puts a burden onto the occupier. It increases the cost. It makes the space less flexible. So if you're coming to a scheme, if you're coming with a scheme that's only accessible via a goods lift, and you're telling the council that it's suitable for last mile deliveries, it actually is. We normally think that touches that market.
Okay. Sultan, how was your experience? Do you have a experience of preparing these economic strategies when you come into employment force space? Or,
It's been a bit of a new one to us, I think. That level of
DC? No, okay. Elsewhere in London, I mean, it's, as you say, the London plan, I think it's similar. Yes.
I think what you find is developers, when they put their plan application, they regardless of what this policy says, they will always put an economic report in it that tries to demonstrate the benefits of their scheme. So it's not necessarily new. It's not overly burdenful because most of the material would already be supporting applications saying how fantastic number of jobs there are.
Okay, right. Okay. J3 next, protecting existing employment floor space. We're on to J3. Yeah, I understand. I mean, this is essentially it's the other side of the coin, isn't it? You know, you try to maximise, provision of new industrial floor space and protect the sector. Various clauses and J3 parts go through that. And there's a main one proposed to implementation text.
Yes.
Again, the same thing we just talked about.
Yeah, about the
conditions. Okay, I don't have any other questions around that. Then we'll be on to still got policy J4. I'm sorry, I'll see it. Yes.
Yeah, it was just that question again about the protection of existing,
I'm sorry, yes.
whether or not existing uses.
Yes, yes. Yeah, let's think about how this would work.
Yes.
An example then. So when by cross referring to J3, it means that allocation process. Yeah. With the going back to protect the minimum of the scheme or whatever. Then any reduction goes through this J3 process.
Yeah, so it's specifically, so in the case of PML and our site, I would imagine the most relevant part would be part 4, talking about all developments and site allocation, designated to deliver employment floor space would seek to re-provide suitable employment floor space for any existing business uses on the site. It's just understanding what the case might be where we don't have that existing on site, because what we have at the moment are interim uses, for example, but it's not anything permanent. Perhaps. But that's specific to our site. But, yeah.
How would it work?
I think for the mill side, I've mentioned there is a LUMUA on the site, so it will also apply to which specify that like any loss on the employment capacity would not be. I guess the main part is that we use that to predict it. We work around how it will be. It's like the condition is outlined, like maximum, but the principle is that it isn't more any development that resulted in like lot smaller capacity, we treat committed capacity as existing capacity, and any loss of that.
That doesn't give a process to provide flexibility then, does it? It just says you can't go any lower.
So I'm not familiar with the detail of individual sites, but I'm just thinking, I think what the plant's trying to deal with is the quite common scenario where a site has already been cleared of its industrial uses before the applications are made. And the problem with that is, of course, it zeroes the industrial floor space on it. So where we've had this with the GLA before, and it isn't with this site, not specifically with this plan, is that what they've wanted when you've extinguished the industrial use, meanwhile uses on everything else, they view the application through the lens of what would have been on the site if it was being used in line with its designation. And the normal thing is that the London industrial stock tends to use at 65% plot ratio. So you either go back to what was on the site before you pulled it all down, or you agree the theoretical capacity of the site if it's designated use is 55%. Because otherwise we have lots, I'm not knowing specifically that one, but I know lots of sites elsewhere where they've been through long-term regeneration proposals, and the default is it's an empty site, it's got nothing on it now, it's got only meanwhile uses on it, therefore your industrial policies don't apply, and the opportunity cost that happened, or the opportunity loss that happened a few years ago is simply written off.
Yeah.
So I think if it's not clear enough here, I think we could probably work on something which maybe even goes back to what was the floor space before it was cleared, or what was the 65% as a starting benchmark.
Yes, well, I can understand that on sites that are cleared. It seems to me that J3 isn't designed for this at all. It's designed where there's, as it says, protecting on floor space. It deals with where there are existing businesses. And the only real flex is to protect and keeping that floor space. If you can't, you have to relocate the business. So it's like you've got existing floor space in the business and you relocate it. It's clear that's a different scenario, and that's what I think these cases, isn't it? So at the moment, so I don't think J3 is actually relevant, really. Is it?
Yeah, I think J3 is about protecting capacity and for specific sites that have been cleared. Yeah, we have.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, going back to the mods to those allocations, it says you take the reference point being the permission. You could have taken a different reference point, which is, what was there previously, or this, that's something that, that's a reference point. But then it says the flexibility is provided applying J3. I don't think you can really apply J3 unless it's about relocation. Well, you said it just takes you back to J3, which means you don't lose anything. So that doesn't provide flexibility. I don't think is that.
Part 1 of J3 is all developments that result in less loss of employment capacity in terms of floor space on Hill will not normally be supported, I think.
That's it's restricted by different types of work, isn't it? Slightly different approaches on Hill and LMUAs, and then micro areas, and then site allocations. And these site allocation, our forcing to be the one that's most relevant to site allocations. That's all premised on being existing businesses there. And if you can't keep them in your space, you relocate them. But that again doesn't really work unless you say flexibility is, well, if your permission is 10,000 square meters, you can provide it on the site, or you have a relocation strategy to provide it somewhere else. Which I don't know if that would work.
Or either, but I think it's just the 2 points really. The fact that in our case it's a maximum, and us providing under it would still mean that we are compliant, but it's slightly And then the second part is about addressing a net loss in existing businesses, but what do we do where there is not? It's not the case, and we want to be mindful that the uses that are there are meaningful uses, so we would look to re-provide that if that.
I think you would agree, meanwhile uses, they're meanwhile, but 43 provide them is not sensible. But if there's a gap in the policy as to what to do when the site is cleared, and there's no planning permission, no default starting position, probably clear, tidy up the policy and refer back to its last previous floor space.
Would that fit within J3? Would that be the most appropriate place for it? Because it's about protecting employment floor space. I mean, it could be about protecting employment capacity, couldn't it? Because if floor space is like it exists there.
I think it flows from J3 1 certainly, because that's about protecting employment capacity in terms of floor space. So it sort of fits.
Yeah, I think it's best fitted because J1 is more about the spatial users, and then J2 is about any new employment code. So I think any cases there are lots of capacity or like existing. This is not the case in that website. But the general flow would be more heavy into the quality if there are lots of capacity. We can refer to this. Yeah, we're happy to tidy up that.
So, I mean, thinking about conceptually, the title of the policy might actually be protecting existing employment capacity or something like that, rather than what it is at the moment, and then that would kind of flow from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we're making this big plan even bigger.
And this one already has a strategic above it.
I know. I was 100 pages. Anyway,
but I think you're right. In terms of capacity, I think the idea of it to refer the decision making to what we would be looking for to measure that capacity. Again, then that might help clarify, exactly where you have an empty site.
Yeah.
But if it needs to be made clear that we wouldn't be looking to replace meanwhile uses, but meantime uses, so that would actually get in the way. Sensible use of land.
Yeah.
Back to its main use.
We have one more question, sorry. And apologies if I'm making you repeat yourself, but it would just be useful to understand what we mean when we say we go back to what the last use was. Is the expectation to provide the last use, or was it a specific percentage of that?
I think given the plan and the direction of all plans in London is a nil net loss of capacity. I'm just thinking probably better by an example that if you had a 4,000 square metre B2 factory on it that you pulled down a couple of years ago, then despite the fact that space was pulled down 2 years ago, for policy decision taking, we would still want to explore where that floor space has gone, whether that floor space should form part of the re-provision mix looking forward. And then, of course, all the rest of the DM policies come in if it's not already in that location. But it's just saying that the starting point with the empty site,
I can see it's need for a reference point, isn't it?
Yes.
A sensible and reasonable reference point to negotiate for, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. And then if it's so for the reference point, I think we'll make it clear that it was the previous floor space on site, and if you can't work out what the previous floor space was, there are sites where it's very difficult. The London plan default is 65%.
And that's single story, 65% of the hectare.
Yeah, 65% is the prevailing plot ratio for any London-wide industrial site. So
Single story. Yeah.
Yeah, most London is single story at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Right, okay, well, thank you. I'll leave that with you. And I think there will be, well, then the cross-reference to J3 in the proposed mod to those allocations. Maybe then be appropriate to work because it would have some process to work. Is that okay for you to say something?
Yeah, we will need to see the wording.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I might leave now.
Yeah, I think I might do that. Thank you for pointing. I want to talk about the steel tariff tax, employment, training, etc. And then we've got a discussion about industrial and office line, and then the hotel one. So shall we just have a break for 20 minutes? We'll come back on the steel. And so we move on to policy J4. So questions I had about this, several parts to them, but the first one was about part 1B, your response. The council response to that was that this was not a prescriptive requirement, it was a facilitative requirement. It's basically asking the applicant to negotiate with and collaborate with particular parts of the council, in essence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so and that goes back a bit to what we were talking about, the economic strategy, which would be part of that discussion.
I think it's a separate one.
Right. Okay.
So they have to work with the council and work on the employment strategy, which is something that we have been doing it like for long, like in the DM process then too. They have to work with the council on the like financial contributions as well as to see how they will provide jobs and trainings, opportunity with the training program.
Okay, sorry. Right, okay. So that's the sort of process bit.
Yeah.
The thing I really want to focus on, and you say that's been established.
It is.
Okay. So the thing I wanted to start with really to focus on was the approach to the use of tariff-based contribution, really. So you say that these policy requirements, so this approach to collaborating with these type of people and coming up with an employment strategy, then making a financial contribution to help deliver that strategy, was something that goes back to at least 2018.
Yes.
The plan that was adopted then. Right. So I suppose, and you say it was found sound, so it was discussion at that time, or not?
Yes. It is because we have carried that percentage, like requirement with the percentage, to the emerging plan, and we did have viability testing on that.
Okay, well I'll come on to that, but
Yeah.
just going back to the adopted plan then, have you still got access to the inspector's report? It probably exists somewhere.
Maybe I have to check. Yeah, I think it's
I'd be interested to read. Could you get me the extract relating to this particular policy requirement?
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in that. And secondly, the Newham Council has a community infrastructure levy charging schedule or not? Does. Okay. When was that adopted?
2014.
So before 2018. So that was in place when that policy was tested at that time. Okay. So what does the SIL charging schedule? Well, I suppose two things about it. I know it was factored into the viability assessment by BAP, whatever the charge is. The charge is fixed, aren't they?
Yeah.
So long I've done some examinations. There used to be these regulations, something lists that set out what the money would be used for. Sorry?
Regulation 123.
Do they still exist, or is it? No. So you can use this. So you've got a SIL charging schedule approved, and that's just a tax on development. Yeah. And it comes automatically, and you spend it on.
Actually, I think you spend it on the list of infrastructure, identifying your infrastructure delivery plan, but I'll come back to you on.
Well, okay. I'm just trying to get the basic of how it works these days, but there are certain things. It's not what you spend it on isn't part of the schedule, is it? The adopted schedule. The adopted schedule sets the charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's some sort of process to indicate what the council spends it on. And there's some monitoring of that and reporting of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have that. So the first thing struck me is if you've got a tariff-based contribution for employment training, why isn't it funded by SIL?
Because employment and training is normally through Section 106.
Well, but SIL, and the whole point of when SIL was brought in, I seem to recall, was it would reduce the need for Section 106 because things that are tariff-based contributions would be dealt with by the SIP.
Yes, but I
Section
think
106.
I think because employment and training is always through Section 106 because it's part of the statutory planning application test, but I could get back to you on more information on that. But most boroughs do have employment and training as Section 106.
Yes, okay.
And there's like a S106 SPD that sets out how you calculate that Section 106 amount.
London-wide one.
Well, different boroughs, I don't know.
Okay. So is there anything London plan that this links to? London plan. DG1, yes. That's good. Skills and opportunities for all, E11. It's listed in your policy links. One other thought.
Yeah, check.
So I think in policy E11, part B,
Which page is that on?
page 276 of the London plan. It says,
Okay, skills and all. Yeah.
you can through Section 106 obligations.
Development plans to support employment, skills development, apprenticeships, other education training opportunities for construction enterprises, including through Section 106 obligations where appropriate. Someone must have found this sound as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. Typically, Section 106.
Yes, it does. Yes, it
And
does.
then all the London boroughs follow that. So.
Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. So you've been using it, and you've been monitoring it using your infrastructure funding statement and annual monitoring report since then. Okay. So I understand how it works. The policy relates to achieving these targets of job percentages, but the money isn't used directly for that. That's the kind of objective of it. Is that right? The tariff is not to subsidise employment or anything like that. It's to train up local people to try and achieve these percentages of local employment. Is that right?
Yes, so the money is used to subsidize our new work, which is like an executive arm to have like to organize training and like career workshops and things for local employment. Yeah, for the exact percentage is.
So on the construction phase, you're trying to get 35% of construction workers involved in the project being Newham residents. Yeah. Okay. So that's the objective. So the builder comes along and they make this contribution. They've come up with this employment strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two parts. So one
Okay.
part is the on-site, really like recruitment on the local residents, and another part is the financial contributions. So for on-site recruitment, we have like an employment strategy to be submitted, which is conditioned like Section 6.
Yeah, okay.
And they have monitoring. Like I think they have to review like every 3 or 5 years with the borough, like they have employment those people, and then financial contribution is in like
And that's used
separate.
that's then handed over to
our
training
new-
providers and our new and whatever.
Yeah.
I see. And that's just a wider initiative to enable when people try and recruit locally that the people are there skilled and trained and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not direct. There's no once the money's handed over, that's then the developer and the end user are not responsible for that use of that money anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. So two approaches to it to achieve these targets, these 35%, and then ultimately 50% end user. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So it's a tariff, a levy on all development. So still don't understand why it isn't still anything. maybe I'll read that report and maybe I'll look back at the London plan. But obviously, any section 106 to get this contribution has to meet the NPPF SIL rate tests being necessarily directly related and fairly and reasonably related, scale and kind. So you've told me why you think that's the case with these. Fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. Well, I suppose because it's proportionate, tariff based, I suppose there's a you can probably tick that box off in the sense of that one. Directly related. Well, yes, I suppose it is directly related in the sense that jobs are related directly to that development of building it and then occupying it. So I understood that with that. It's the necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms that I'm struggling a bit to see how you meet that test. And your response seems to be all developments contribute to the plan's objective for building an inclusive economy. Yes, but is it really necessary to make that development?
Yeah, because our position as council, especially in Newham, we have like a very low, like not very, like lower than London average salary, and you have like job qualities problem, like skills. So one of our council's priority is to support inclusive economy. So that's why every development include providing employment for space or just on development that will yield construction jobs. They have to support this objective. So we think that in planning term, it's also necessary because it's supporting the economic growth in borough. So we think that should be.
So in terms of how this has been operated since 2018, so several years of experience, it's applied to all major developments. Has it always then, has every development had a stage in every major development? Has there been any pushback on it? Or is it always part of the negotiation over viability?
To our understanding, we don't see there are any complaints or pushback on that. Yeah.
And it comes back to that prioritisation in BFN for where this is second priority after affordable and family homes.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of its significance in terms of the additional policy costs, I think when we talked about under matter one viability and the overall, I think Quad came up with a list of the most significant, and I don't think anyone necessarily disagreed. They were around H3, the affordable housing requirement, H4, which we talked about yesterday, which again, it was made the point that, well, that's one of the most significant additional costs. And then there was the education provision under SI 14, which is a fairly standard approach. And then there was this one, I think, it's on the top four of the most significant additional costs in terms of what the viability evidence showed. It was a bit vague in the viability. The BNP report was a little bit unclear, I thought.
I think there's a built-in kind of percentage, isn't it, for section?
Yes, it seemed to be, yeah, through the section 106.
Yeah, exactly. So, but just to let you know that this is normal. You only ask for employment and training contributions in all boroughs. And because the London plan, the GLA, made that justification as part of their examination. And I think with regards to, it's acceptable in planning terms, is to do with the fact that we're asking for jobs to be increased and stuff like that. And there is unemployment in London and we need to train them up and stuff in order to get them into these jobs and things like that. So they've managed to make that argument as part of the London plan examination, and hence the reason why that policy's in there, and that kind of trickled down to everyone's local plan.
Maybe I need to go back and read my report as well. Okay, thank you. Yes, okay. Can I just look? Yes. So you're not necessarily agreeing that it's one of the most significant policy costs.
No. Yeah, we disagree with that.
You disagree with that?
We can come back to you.
Well, let me just work through an example then, because the HPF provided one. So I'll use that. So using the formula in the plan, which is construction phase first, then I'll talk about the occupation. So they use an example of a 21 million construction project, which I don't know how big development that would be, but I don't know, 100 homes. Well, whatever, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's not very typical. Anyway, they use that example and they work it through, and it comes out as a total financial contribution. They say the construction phase 564,000, over $500,000. Does that? Did you see the sum they did? Does that sound about right? Does that sound right? I mean, the math seemed right to me from what they said. But
Yeah, I think the methodology is right, but I didn't look into the exact.
Yeah, I think they're right. But when it comes to construction, they can actually do it as Sarah said. They can actually not produce a financial contribution. They could do the equivalent financial contribution and allow the Newham residents to actually do construction training while they do the construction works.
so if the developer comes in with its employment strategy,
So
They
it's
said we're going-
two separate ones. So there's construction training.
Yeah.
The construction training is that you work out how much, and then you actually do it on site, because that's a better way. You actually build in a development. So therefore, you need to provide that financial amount is the equivalent of 7 young people training, and they provide it for 7 young people in Newham. And that's all part of the strategy that they submit at the time to say, okay, we will, 7 people from Newham, and you've got a service that kind of does that in the strategy, and then you have the lump sum amount that goes into training overall for anything that's not construction.
but the financial contribution for the construction phase just seems to be this formula in this paragraph.
Yeah.
So let me okay, if you look at it, if you're trying to achieve this 35% local employment in the construction phase, their builder says, right, I'm going to be employing 100 people on this site.
Yeah, they still need to have.
And I'm going to 35 of them are going to be local.
Yeah.
They still need to pay the tariff. That doesn't exempt, so they can't reduce the tariff.
I believe we would follow requirements because we have that.
Right.
We can come back on that one.
But yeah, definitely like when they come to the DM process.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. The formula is the formula, and if you put the numbers in, work through the HPX, it seems to generate this number. Okay, and then there's also the occupation phase, whereas if I just did a very simple one, and if you said 1,000 square metres of B2, you work through that formula, I think it leads to about £50,000 or something like that, roughly. I don't know. So I don't know what figures that BNP put in, because it wasn't totally clear in the viability assessment. Because I think, as you said, it all fell within that column that was. Sorry.
Yeah.
That included the Section 106 contribution. Okay. So it all leaves me a bit puzzled as to how significant this is. I think, well, BNP themselves, I think they said it can be significant on some of the typologies, but they also, I think when in the bit of the main report, they put that in the context of 35% affordable housing requirement. I don't know why, but they did. So when you actually put it in relation to the 60%, obviously that's a bigger.
Well, it comes back to the 60% argument, isn't it?
Well, being the biggest influence overall, yes. So if you didn't have an affordable housing, if you took the 0% affordable housing and you looked at all the other policy costs, you'd get a lot more green in there, wouldn't you, in the spreadsheet? So and as you go across from 0 to 60, it obviously increases the impact red. Yeah. But you could lose other variables as well. Okay, so what you seem to be telling me is that this is established. There doesn't seem to have been a lot of pushback on it. Not quite clear how big the contribution is, but it's been factored into the viability assessment. And it's consistent with the London plan. Okay. Right.
Yeah, if it's helpful to learn, if it's helpful to know, there have been some objection from the developers on this policy, but we do add in modification MO 56 to clarify that they can be subject to like viability grounds, which is cross-reference to BFN4, and we have actually agreed those wording with some of the developers in associated meetings. So they also know this, like it can be dealt with.
Yeah.
Future negotiation.
Yes. The wording of the policy at the moment then doesn't give a viability.
Yeah, it actually did, but we didn't cross-reference it to BFN4 because it's all the flexibility is in BFN4, like for the financial contribution. So now we made clear that they cross-reference to each other. And I think people are clear that there's flexibility there. So they agree on that.
Yeah. So we're talking about BFN4. I don't think it's on the agenda. So, but that's into you've got to do a viability assessment, and it brings you all into this late review. You know, all those mechanisms that some of the developers are saying, well, that's that's all lends to time and difficulty, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay. So you said, sorry, the modification refers to proposals that are not proposing to meet the contribution requirement on viability grounds must meet the requirements of policy BFN4. So that's bringing that clause in essence. You do a viability assessment and then you look at all opportunities to try and review it and
And you negotiate during the process.
Okay. Right. Okay. And let me just, the very last one I wanted to look at was part. So part 4, provision of affordable workspace will be supported on employment designations where the following are met. So it's not you're saying that's not a requirement, it's just a supported policy.
Yes.
Because there's not actually a great need for affordable workspace as such.
There's not a great need, and there are major concerns with the viability of delivering intensified industrial formats.
Yeah.
So rather than making a requirement, which is further burden those schemes, it is a judgment. But I think if we tried to make it a requirement, we just get objections and undermining the viability of our industrial intensification schemes, and that's almost a bigger prize for us.
Yeah.
We've got as far as floor space goes, as you know, especially for office and little, we've got 600,000 square metres of office pipeline busy looking for new uses, which includes these small flexible. So it didn't seem to be a major priority.
I mean, he says we would support it, but would a private developer put forward affordable workspace? They're not. I mean,
the plan to provide flexibility for them to provide it. But they have to justify whether it's needed.
Why would they want to provide it? Sorry.
My guess would be that somebody wishing to reduce the quantum of floor space will come up with a better economic offer for their site.
I see. It's part of this economic strategy. They may actually think it's a way of, I see.
And in that case, if they wish to give us affordable workspace, possibly in lieu of something, policies and that. The policies are framed to allow.
I understood.
If that happens, it would be accepted. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So just finally, we just touched on actually, just looking at the overall, what the plan does and so it identifies this need for 418,000 square metres of industrial and 118,000 square metres of office. On the office one, you're saying, well, there's no problem with meeting that. We've got far too much in the pipeline, so that's not an issue. So in terms of industrial, you've broken down, where that supply is in terms of stuff that's in the pipeline, stuff with potential, and intensification potential. Yeah, and you've got figures for that based on, it's fairly significant increase through intensification, but that's real in the sense that's looked at individual sites, but it's potential in the sense that it's.
So because, of course, in the current market, developers aren't queuing up to promote planning applications for these things. The evidence base looked at the existing portfolio. It worked out where we do genuinely have chunks of underused land that is likely or is credible to come forward for redevelopment in the plan period. And so it set out a list of sites where we think this might happen. And if it does, the council wishes you to try to intensify it for X quantum of floor space. So the floor spaces are calculated on I think it's 120% plot ratio, because as we discussed earlier, the default under 65, intensification starts above 65. We do have formats in circulation that deliver 120, a plot ratio of 120. So that's being used as a guide. But the tension always comes that the council is trying to follow the London plan and trying to be aspirational, and is trying to identify where these opportunities are and signpost developers to where we think they are for them to respond. The complexity we always have is they're not allocations in a traditional sense. No. But I think that's just the way London works, and it's a 21-year plan period.
So, but the overall picture is that there's that potential. If you do deliver that or some of that and the stuff in the pipeline, and the employment on the allocations, the additional new floor space on the allocations, that together, provided you don't lose too much through the other protected products, should be getting towards or would be sufficient to meet that 418. So Newham's in a reasonably good position compared to some parts of London.
We know where the sites are.
Yeah.
The challenge is getting that developer to the table saying, I want to do this. So with a fair wind, there is enough land in Newham to be on underutilised sites who follow a London plan intensification agenda. And if those sites come forwards, then we meet our plan period need. Not all of them will. We'll get some windfalls elsewhere. But for a London borough following the London plan, it's as best as we can get for a 21-year period. And I know where this has cropped up elsewhere, just the second you give a developer a number, they don't want a number because they want full flexibility. But the council's position is, if we don't give you a starting number that adds up to the London plan, then when it comes to making the decision on the site, we have nothing. We have nothing quantitative to start from. So,
but going back to the employment allocations, they don't have a number, do they? Just for floor space.
I think there's a modification, isn't there?
Yeah, in a local plan, we didn't put the number for each of the sites, but then we have a modification to like adding a footnote to the table in the local plan to refer back to the employment land review, which sets out the numbers. It's in the employment land review table 4.5.
Which mod is this then? J1?
Yeah, J1.
Is this the intensification table?
Yes, this line to me.
Is this MO 51.1? It says sites with potential for intensification, and including the 10 strategic industrial locations, LIL, with potential intensification, identified in table 4.5 of the employment land.
Yes.
So that's a potential figure for those particular existing SIL and LIL.
Yes.
Yeah. So so I understood. So that's a reference point for that. What I said was, I thought I misunderstood what you said. I think the plan doesn't include any floor space for the allocations that are proposed for mixed use or deployment.
No,
Doesn't
Not-
have.
not if they have permissions in that.
Well, we've gone back to referring to permissions, but
Yeah.
they don't. So when we just take any example, it says employment. It's like the number, isn't it? About like the housing index. It doesn't have the figures. So back to Riverside, got a principle, residential, employment uses, blah, blah, whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't say 50,000 square meters of employment uses or whatever.
No, we didn't. We have like prepared our like capacity
Yeah.
testing, but it's not in the plan itself.
I think, did you provide a figure for what the overall capacity was on the new?
I can work out and
Well, you gave me some figures, sites with permission, industrial potential in planning, and then the intensification figures. So the ones with industrial potential in planning, does that include the allocations?
no,
Or is that
so it includes two of the site. One is the Albert Island and one is Cheaper. It doesn't include the site allocations. We didn't calculate that in, I think it's because there are uncertainty around how like those employment use are fit around the site allocations.
Yeah.
Because they're like primarily for housing, and like how they negotiate in the planning process will change the employment amount a lot. So we do not want to add that uncertainty into our supply and demand analysis. So we just add in those we are more certain of, like sale and real, that they are less factor affecting future potential.
But when you provided a figure of 23,800 square meters of sites with permission.
Yeah.
In your.
Yeah, that's the pipeline of land with planning permission. I think
Some of those could be on allocations.
some of them, yes.
Yeah.
So there's not you haven't put a separate figure for allocations, nor have you done individual figures for individual allocations. But they're in these figures somewhere, and maybe not all.
Yeah, if they have a permission.
If they have a permission,
if they have a permission.
But anyway, so when you add all those figures up, the allocations, it's the potential for intensification. That's the biggest. That's the most significant. That's the 300.
That's the big bit. Because
Whereas the allocations may just be 30,000 square meters or whatever.
I think most of the allocations here are large residential led
It's a
allocations.
smallish amount.
If they happen to be on a SIL or an LSIS or something, the nil net loss starting position comes into play. But given, as with everything, there's a very strong need for housing. I think the priority for the allocations is more delivering the homes on them.
Okay.
The industrial strategy is more about trying to when our industrial sites come up for redevelopment, because they're free of the residential home value which will exist on a lot of these mixed use allocations. Focus is to try to deliver our need through industrial intensification along with the London plan. So yeah, the mixed use ones I'm not sure is a big component. So if it's got planning permission, it's in the updated numbers, but I genuinely wouldn't expect large quantums of industrial to come out of mixed use where there's a residential component already in play.
Okay, thank you. Right, fine. So that footnote to J1, table 12. I mean, it's just cross-referencing the factual, do a source of evidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think it materially affects the policy. So
And I don't think we haven't had, although everybody's been fully aware of how that intensification number has been developed since 2020. We haven't seen those developers objecting to those indicative numbers and the way they've been scouted out or developed. So we don't have objections to it.
right, thank you. So anything else on employment, economic development, employment, J policies? No? Okay, so what we'll do before we break for lunch, we'll go back to, anything else from you? Okay, so we could jump to the hotel policy. HS8, is it? Yeah. Right. So number of elements to the policy, but essentially it's in the high street part of the plan. Hotels being a town centre use defined in the NPPF. London plan comes into play, which is the point that Stantec make about the opportunity areas. So we touched on that. I mean, you've obviously got a particular issue, but I mean, it's the Stratford and Stratford and Maryland neighbourhood. It is. So you've proposed some modifications to that, but also now which we talked about, but also now talking about HS8 as well.
Yes.
How that fits with the London plan approach to hotels and vocational guidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, you say what you wish to say.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you for bringing it forward. Much appreciated. And I'm just going to give a bit of context, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
It's relevant. The context is regarding this, I suppose, my client's predicament as it sits at the moment, and it relates to not just to the hotel HS8. It obviously is the vision as well, which is N8, and then of course that then knocks into the site allocation, which is N8.
Yeah.
SA4. So we see the three together really in this context. So it is obviously an existing bingo hall, which is a non-residential use as it currently stands. It is in an opportunity area. It is next to the DLR station, so Hotel 6. So it's highly accessible, a great sustainable location next to local facilities. It's actually called the High Street, so it's on the High Street itself. So it sounds much more like a town centre environment. It is unfortunately just outside of the town centre, but it's on the town centre boundary pretty much. And my clients have been advised that a scheme that wants to deliver the site application is unviable. We discussed this matter before. Obviously, we put forward our viability assessment. Obviously, the client's also being told that the hotel demand in this location is high, so therefore there's more hotels in this location. So, faced with all of that, my client's thinking, well, if the site allocation is for residential, I'm being told it's unviable, I'll have to make sure something is delivered. So the hotel component will make the residential or a mixed-use scheme viable or more viable. So therefore, they're putting forward a suggestion of a more mixed-use approach on the site. So not just residential, that, by the way, is also supposed to be delivering, I suppose, an affordable type of workspace at the ground level. We're also proposing some form of community use as well, which will help deliver those aspirations. So during the pre-app discussions, obviously the GLA have said absolutely, hotel is supported strategically on policy E10. And obviously Newham have a different approach. They're saying, no, we don't support hotels at this location. And that comes down to the draft policy as it's currently written, and the site allocation, as it's currently written, which does not allow for this. And the same with the vision, does not allow for a hotel on the site because it's not in a town centre. So the clients obviously, from our perspective, stuck in a rock and a hard place. They're being told the scheme is just not deliverable. The site allocation is not deliverable in its current form. It needs to be more flexible. Or the client keeps the site in its current form, which is the bingo hall, and tries to get a meanwhile use on it, which it currently has, I think, permission for a banqueting venue. So leave it as it is, but that won't help the council because it doesn't deliver their housing, and it doesn't deliver affordable housing, and doesn't deliver the workspace. So my client's in a catch-22. Does he invest in a scheme that he's been told is unviable, carry a lot of risk with it, and fingers crossed it might become viable, or does he just keep with what he's got? And keep with what he's got is presumably where he's sitting at the moment, and that doesn't deliver the council's aspiration. So what we're trying to say here really is there is a third option, and that's clearly to bring forward a scheme that is meeting everybody's aspirations. Therefore, it's deliverable. Hotel plus residential and the business workspace that the council wants, affordable housing and everything that goes with it. So we're simply asking for policies HS8, which is the key one that's now, to allow for hotels in opportunity areas that are in close proximity to public transport. Clearly, this site is in that category because it is supported by policy 10. And the same, therefore, means that the Maryland vision would then have to reflect the fact that hotels would be acceptable in the opportunity area within the Maryland area. And similarly, the site allocation would then have to acknowledge that hotel could be delivered only as part of the mixed-use scheme that delivers, as it states in the rest of the site allocation, residential and the other uses. Our client is more than happy to accept that. And therefore, we're just asking whether or not policy HS8 can be adjusted to recognise hotel is an appropriate use in opportunity areas in this area. Then we go back to the matters for relating to H8 and M8 and N8SA for the website.
Okay, no, thank you. That's very clearly put. I think, well, obviously we talked about the allocation and I understand, the issue about the viability and the location and all that. And as you quite rightly say, I think that all flows from the strategic approach to hotels in this plan, because I think one would then follow the other one. So I think we can talk about the allocation and whether it becomes viable and how you can and whether the policy would allow that in that particular. So that's fine. So I think the issue for today is the consistency or the justification for HS8 to steering hotels to where this plan steers them, as opposed to what the London plan says.
Yes.
So that's the nub of it, I think.
Yeah.
So I think what the council, you'll have read the council's statement in response to this matter, which provides some context for the strategic approach and a view that, well, I think you'd say that it's not inconsistent with the London plan. The London plan may allow hotels in opportunity areas, and it gives equal weight to them than one reading of that policy. But they are clearly a main town centre use, I think. Don't think that's in dispute in terms of NPPF terms. Is it all?
It's not in dispute in terms of NPPF.
No.
But obviously town centres and opportunity areas given equal weight to them.
In the London plan.
In the London.
Yeah. But I don't think I suppose the council position would there be, the London plan doesn't rule us out of taking a local approach based on our circumstances to steer hotels to particular parts of the borough. Yeah, is that in it? And then you go on to explain the particular issues about hotels in Newham. So anyway, I've read it. So do you want to just emphasise whatever you wish to emphasise?
The only thing I would emphasise is the fact that the London plan is a very broad strategic approach, and Newham have in the land available for Newham for development, there are different pressures on the same land available. And for us, the local plan prioritizes our uses, primarily housing. And that means that this policy is taking a strategic approach where hotels being a main town centre use, us having a healthy pipeline of hotel uses already as it's coming through our monitoring framework, and meeting its overall function as part of London as supporting the visitor economy through that pipeline. There isn't a need to diverge beyond what's identified in HS8 as the main locations for hotel uses, which is town centres, local centres, and the area around the EXL.
So that, from your point of view, those locations have sufficient capacity to provide sufficient opportunity to accommodate more hotels?
Yes.
Enough hotels?
Yes.
Right. You refer to the overall pipeline of hotel rooms remains strong. I think that this is a new one. Is likely to exceed the demand set through the evidence supporting the London plan. So what does that mean in terms of, does that evidence come down to a newer level for how much hotels need? Because it doesn't set a target, does it?
No, it doesn't, but it provides And bear in mind that actually this evidence is being updated by the GLA as we speak. We have seen an indicative figure, but these are not made public yet.
For Newham?
Really, yes, for Newham. So the data we're talking about that's available in the public domain is now up to date. It's 2017, but it's the best available we have in the public domain. As we work with the GLA on the London plan, and due to various factors, there is an indication that demand overall is lower than it used to be in the 2017 assessment, and that includes forward. But obviously, this is like future things that can't put in the plan as it currently is. It's just the wider context as it's emerging.
Yeah.
We're already with a pipeline that will deliver more by 2040 than what was allocated at 2017.
When you say allocated 2017?
Allocated.
Do you mean what the GLA added in?
It was an assessment of demand for each borough, taken forward for each borough in that time period, which for us would be, that is what our demand is. Therefore, that is probably what we should be. But we're already meeting that, and there is already a lot of additional proposals in the pipeline. Some of them are on Silvertown Keys site allocation, and there's ones that are not quantified, let's say. They are outlined in this case. But in this case, this is a future local center. There is strong pipeline coming through that's approved, that meets the needs of Newham and beyond.
Yeah, so in terms of, you feel that there's sufficient capacity to meet. You didn't do, as part of this plan, and this quantified need for visitor accommodation.
We've relied on what was available by the plan.
Yeah, okay. So that was it. Recognising that could be outdated, but you're saying that the unpublished evidence is that actually, if anything, that 2017 data, the annual requirement or whatever, probably come down rather than gone up?
It will come down, yes.
Overall London. Okay. Well, we'll see if...
for Newham, for Newham's data at the very least, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's also, so that's the strategic overview, yeah, understood. So that's why you don't need to broaden out to other accessible parts of opportunity areas. Yes. Yeah. Now, you also refer to draft modification, isn't there?
Yes.
You're talking about temporary accommodation and homelessness. Tell me what this modification is. Remind me what this modification is.
It's to highlight that strategic approach that we have that prioritizes housing coming forward over the base hotel visitor accommodation, especially if it does not meet with our spatial strategy for hotels. So it's to help us in the context of updated, it in part it provides an update to the latest available monitoring data, and in part it provides the context of a lot of the pressure on demand that's coming forward for hotels that we're seeing is in part to do with the affordability of housing and place temporary accommodation in hotels, which means that some of the hotel capacity is taken up by that temporarily. And it's increasing demand currently on hotels, but that doesn't mean that in the long term, 15 years down the line, we want to have substantially more hotels than there actually is a need for from a employment and tourism perspective. They are supposed to meet a specific visitor accommodation demand, not a housing demand. And we're trying through this policy to make sure that that is clear, that demand for hotels needs to meet those needs rather than housing need, and why it's taking a slightly more stringent approach spatially than the London plan, so that we can ensure that more land is available for housing.
Yeah. So two aspects, I think, to that. One, it's not appropriate to deal with homelessness problem by providing hotels which may in the short term be a bad way of meeting that, because that's just not. And the other way of looking at that is, well, to help reduce the homelessness problem, you need to optimise the number of homes built, and that will take the pressure off that. So for both those reasons, it's not appropriate to boost the supply of hotels to respond to that issue. Understood. Does any of this text here go beyond a minor modification to I think it's introducing a well, does the policy say anything about needs assessment? Or so yeah, I suppose where HS8 Part 2 comes in, that's when you're talking about a sequential test for out of town. So it doesn't rule out hotels out of town.
No, of course not.
But there it talks about market testing.
Precisely because we want to be sure that they respond to an economic
Visitor demand
demand
yeah.
rather than
Yes.
yes.
Oh, speculative. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, understood. So oh, it's a justification text, isn't it? It's not a recommendation text. Yes. Okay. Right. Anything further you wish to say?
No, I just think could do with being a bit more flexible. Obviously, the sequential test is there. In the event that there are no other sites for town centres, I suppose that would apply to our clients' sites. But because of the site allocation, the onerous nature of it, it's residential or nothing. If it's unviable, which it is, at this point in time, there's a big change in the market, as we've talked about. The reflection of the market for the other subject of commerciality. But if it remains as it is, then nothing comes forward. So it's about, is there an opportunity for more flexibility here to deliver homes as well as hotels in this opportunity area? Because it's not contrary to the plan, and I don't think it would necessarily be contrary to what the strategy is in this particular location, because of its proximity to the DLR station and its proximity to the town centre. So in this particular case, through a site application, not necessarily through the HS8, is there not an opportunity to deliver something inside rather than remaining stagnant? So, and hence going back to, is there an opportunity to hotel and residential? Stagnating the site just as residential.
Okay.
Right, just talk about the site allocation. So.
But I think we've talked about both. I understand both issues. I think what I'd say was I understand the point you make about London Plan allowing hotels outside town centres in well-connected parts of opportunity areas, but I also understand the council's rationale for, taking a slight variation to that, and I don't think that is out of general conformity with the London Plan or inconsistent with national policy. So I think strategically, that is actually justified. I don't think it is necessary to open it up in the way that you suggest by allowing hotels in other parts of opportunity areas with well-connected public transport. That said, that's one thing. I think I'd come to that view. On the site allocation, well, we talked about that and the flexibility there may be around that and the sequential test of hotels. So, I'll come to a view about that site allocation policy. But in the round, there is issues around viability as well. So yeah, I think that's all I can say for today.
There's just one point, so
Yeah.
just on the viability, and I appreciate you've got two opposing conclusions. The council say it's viable with a certain quantity of affordable housing, whereas we've said no, it's not. Our statements had to be submitted on the 6th of November. The council's viability evidence came out on the 27th. So we are having a review of that information. If it's possible to provide our opinion on that.
Which evidence on the 27th?
It's the viability that we referred to during item 4.
It didn't change it. It just presented the same information, just in a simplified format. So it didn't change any of the numbers or anything. I just wanted extracts from those huge spreadsheets to focus on the ones that related.
Sorry, not additional. Clarification.
Yeah. I think.
Well, we certainly haven't got to the degree of analysing the council's assessment. Yes, the deadlines have passed, but would it be possible if you could, because you've obviously got an opposing view at the moment about the viability of the site allocation. So,
well, I think the evidence showed that site is not viable with the policy requirements in the plan.
Up to 35%.
Yeah.
But up to 35%, whereas your site assessment. So,
zero. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think.
And no residential at all, because it's not viable.
Yeah.
So you've got two opposing views.
Yeah, well, I've got those two opposing views. I don't need another statement. I understand. I mean, your assessment is your assessment. It has various inputs and assumptions. The borough-wide one that was done by the consultants is what it is, and we've explored that, and I've heard views that some of the assumptions are only optimistic of the site or whatever, and so okay. Thank you. Right, so unless there's anything else for this morning, we will now break till, we'll break till 2 o'clock this afternoon on Town Centres. So thank you for your contributions this morning, and I'll see you council this afternoon and friends of Queen's Market this afternoon. And just to let you know, I've got the proposed modifications that you've drafted, and the council have got those, so we'll be able to have a look at those and talk about those this afternoon for the policy HS, whatever it is, on markets. Yeah, thank you.